Now here's an entrant into the 1990 RPG showdown that you might not expect. Yes, it's obvious that Ultraman Club 2 is part of a series, but when you think series of Ultraman games, you're definitely not thinking RPGs. Obviously, Ultraman Club 2 isn't the first Ultraman Club game, but I haven't covered the original, and that's because it was released on the Famicom disk system. Of course, by 1990, the disk system isn't really viable as a platform any longer, and so the series migrated over to cartridges. The publisher of Ultraman Club 2 was Yutaka. They're a bit unusual here, since they're really a branch of Bandai. Bandai is going to continue publishing their own games on the Famicom, while Yutaka takes over a few major lines, Ultraman and Gundam in particular. Ultraman, of course, is the beloved science fiction franchise loosely about space cops who go to Earth, become giant-sized, and wrestle giant monsters. The continuity of the many television series is a bit confusing, but don't worry about it here because this doesn't follow any of them. At the start of the game, the original Ultraman is sent out by Ultra Commander to go check out what's happening in a village on Earth. There he fights a monster in a totally automated battle, barely defeats it, but gets knocked out himself, and has to be nursed back to health by the villagers. None of this actually matters, since your first task is to go right back to your commander, who's only a few screens away. There's an invasion on, and you're going to need help from more Ultramen, and the early stages of the game are you building up enough strength to survive long enough to go find the Ultramen. Fair warning on this one, starting out in Ultraman Club 2 is known for being excessively difficult. If you get knocked out, then you go back to your last save point. That would normally be the commander at your base who gives you a password for continuing, but initially it's just that village. And you could wind up defeated in combat with just one bad random encounter. What I wound up doing was fighting around the village for a long time, but that was the stupid way to do it. You'll lose all your levels if you wind up defeated. It's better to just head south and run away from all the combats until you reach your commander. Then you can regularly save your progress. I spent an hour grinding up to level 4, and at that level I could just barely reach the dungeon that the next Ultraman was in, but I wasn't strong enough to last more than a combat or two inside it. So I made almost no progress here. One of the fun things about Ultraman Club 2 is that if you just walk up to the edge of water, you'll take off flying. There aren't any real natural boundaries for Ultraman. You're welcome to explore the world as you'd like. Of course, certain areas have nastier monsters, including the areas over the water. You'll get into random encounters, and the combat works very similar to Dragon Quest, though there are two key differences here. On your first turn, you have the opportunity to talk to the enemies. This can change some of the enemy behavior, usually in your favor. After you talk, it'll go straight into your turn anyways, so it's not like it costs you anything to do this. Then in battle you can choose to fight, use an item, defend, or run away. But if you're hurt, then you might have the option to use one of your special abilities. When you can use them and what abilities you can use are a bit random. Every character has 4 special abilities that can come up, and for Ultraman, he can put up a shield that reduces damage, throw a beam that can instantly kill an enemy, and has 2 different kinds of beams that do a lot of damage. The defensive ability is usually, but not always, the first one that comes up for Ultraman. Normally, defeating an enemy just nets you some experience. There's no money or shops or inns in the game. You typically will go back to the commander to heal. It is possible for some enemies to drop items, although that didn't occur for me at all. And more usefully, as you progress through the game, you'll obtain capsules that can capture enemies. If you have an empty one, then at the end of the battle, you might capture the enemy, and then you could summon them in a later battle to fight for you. The original Ultraman doesn't get any capsules. You'll have to get some party members to be able to use those. In Japan, this game is really well liked. It brings together a bunch of popular characters, and features a lot of popular monsters from the television shows. My own take on it is, while it's well produced, it's not really a great RPG either. Maybe if I could have reached the point in the game where you can start using capsules, but that barrier to entry is pretty tough, and all I was really seeing was the same combats over and over again, and the combat played out so slow. Without any items to recover health or additional abilities, that hurdle to get over at the start of the game is pretty high. You have to survive flying over to another continent, then your entire way through a dungeon, and then defeat a boss. And over the course of this, while you're getting attacked constantly, you can only take a handful of blows. You might start out in areas where enemies can only do 1 point of damage each. When you're flying, or when you reach the fortress, you'll be encountering enemies that can do 5 or 6 points of damage with each attack. And you only have about 40 hit points. You basically have to spend 1.5 hours to 2 hours grinding up levels far enough that you've completely out-leveled the starting areas. So this isn't a game that makes a good first impression, and I get the impression that most of its fans like it because it's Ultraman, not because it's a good game.